Hey there, everyone. I'm Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today we're going to be looking at the 11th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now, when this film was first released, or first announced, slash when I first saw the trailer for this film, I was super hyped because after the first Avengers film, I think everybody was pumped to see what would happen next, and the other films just kind of helped wet our whistle. And just little by little, things just seemed to be kind of getting bigger. Phase two, even in Phase two, when things were calming down, we started it started looking like the pace was picking back up again as we saw more things happening. Like again, Phase one had brought in all these other brought set up all the characters that make up the Avengers, and before finally bringing them together into Avengers. Then you had Phase two, which not only showed them calming down from that, but also but also started building up more things for later down the line. Like we started seeing the characters trying to settle in, only for them to encounter more disasters that just further upset the status quo for them, or in some cases building up the next storyline with the reveal of the Infinity Stones and Thanos. Just little by little, more things started building up, and with the reveal of Thanos as the next big bad, you knew that shit was getting real, yo. So as such, you were just wondering, well, what's the next Avengers film going to be like? And so the next trailer dropped for Avengers: Age of Ultron, and I was captivated. I thought it looked so awesome. And the way, I knew about Ultron prior to the film, of course. Of course, I learned about him via the next Avengers, where he was the villain of that movie. Though I didn't learn more about him till later after that. After that short version, he was android that was supposed to create world peace. In the comics, he was created by Hank Pym, and shortened to the point he thought humanity was the disease and that it had to be eradicated. So he went HAL 9000. But bottom line, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So all and so pretty much Ultron was like one of the Avengers' biggest bads. And the way they were building him up in the film actually made him look and sound legitimately threatening. In fact, the actor that got to play him was the actor James Spader, and he did and the way he made Ultron sound, it was just so great. Especially during the trailer, they started playing the Pinocchio "I have no strings to hold me down," and then just made it sound threatening until eventually the lyrics changed to Ultron as he ended it with "There are no strings on me." And yeah, it just sounds so creepy. And when you get that first reveal, it looked great. Looked so creepy. And I was pumped. I was super pumped. I wanted to see this film. So I wound up going to see... So me and my mother went to go see it. And I didn't hate... Well, short version, I didn't hate it. I liked it. But it wasn't what I expected either. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about the film. Now, I mean, no, that was back when I first saw it. Right now, after I see it, I think it's a bit better than I thought it was. But I do kind of still feel that bit of whiplash from it, especially. I think this time I kind of prepare myself for it. So, But why exactly did I have that initial reaction? Like, why did I think the film wasn't bad, but not as good as I thought it was? Well, for starters, let's get into the plot summary. And I'm going to pull my phone out right now. I realize I probably should have had it out already. I'm going to have that over there I'm going to have that over here while I'm doing this. And so I might end up pulling it up every once in a while. I also have text messages from the crew at the DC Geeks Nation. If you don't know who we are, check out our YouTube page and our podcast. But that's a podcast. It's on Podbean. Check it out. But that's another thing altogether. But that's another thing. Might talk about it later. Might not. I'm trying to focus on this. I might forget it. If any of the people from the DC Geeks Nation are watching this, I'm probably gonna get fired. Oh boy. Anyway, sorry. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I was saying, where does this movie pick up? Well, for starters, the film actually starts with the Avengers raiding a Hydra base in Sokovia. What they're going after is... It's a base run by Baron Strucker, who is the guy that we saw at the end of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. He was the guy this is the place where Loki's scepter is. Apparently, ever since Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the Avengers have been trying to locate the scepter. With the reveal that Hydra has been embedded in Shield, they know that Shield was the last people to have the scepter. They know that odds are Hydra got their grubby little hands all over it. So they just want to know So of course they're looking for it to try and hopefully. So they're trying to look for it so that it gets out of the bad guy's hands. The Avengers, all of them, are in fact raiding a base. Not one of them with a few spies, just all of them. Yeah, I don't really see the point of having them all come here to get a scepter. I understand Thor would probably be there since it's Loki's scepter, but I don't know. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Wanted to adjust how I looked. I did not like it. I looked off in this thing. Plus, I wanted to answer a text. Once again. DC discussion, once again, check them out. Anyway, as I was saying. Avengers raiding base in Sokovia. They have Loki's scepter. Don't know why they're all there. Can understand if some of them are there, but not all of them. But whatever. Anyways, I was saying. Baron Strucker thinks that they probably have all this covered since they have the twins, aka Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, as we learn, Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, who, I'll just get their backstories out of the way right here. Pretty much these two are natives of Sokovia, and Sokovia is apparently usually a middle ground for a lot of wars. Sorry, adjusting this again. So while nobody really wants the land, it's where a lot of bad things can happen, with usually many civilians caught in the crossfire. And unfortunately, Wanda and Pietro's parents are one of them, as a shell wound up piercing their building and blew up, and their parents died in the explosion. A second one came in, but it didn't go off. Because it wasn't activated, and it apparently landed right in front of the twins, and it had the Stark logo on it. So that this is back during the time when they were making weapons. As such, they kind of grew to resent Tony Stark, and one of the reasons why they volunteered for Strucker's experiments, because they wanted the power to kind of stop all the wars and protect their country. So yeah, because they blame Stark, they see the Avengers as enemies, hence why they probably went to Hydra. But yeah, anyway. So as all this destruction is going on, Wanda and Pietro manage to go out there and actually do fight the Avengers, with Hawkeye ending up sustaining an injury by them before he's getting shot down by a from a bunker, which the Hulk promptly takes out. In the midst of it all, Iron Man manages to get into the base and take out most of the guys inside. He goes in and he has Jarvis hack into their computers and tries to find any structural weaknesses in this building. He does, and as well as any secrets. Hold on a second. Once again, checking a text. Anyway, never mind. Anyway, he's pretty much what he's doing. Like I said, hacking, looking for anything out of the ordinary. So because he wants to wipe the servers of this place so that nobody here has anything to come back to. Personally, I would also call the authorities, since these are all Hydra. They probably did call the authorities, so never mind. I think they do anyway. So never mind. I'm sorry. Sorry anyway. Anyway, but Jarvis manages to find a secret passageway in the building. However, Wanda and Pietro, like I said, are interfering with the Avengers, not just with Hawkeye, but Quicksilver manages to knock down Captain America before making a run for it, while Wanda briefly interferes with Captain America again when he goes to confront Strucker, and then goes to Tony as he finds the area where they're keeping Loki's scepter alongside all this other advanced equipment that's in the building. However, just before he can take Loki's scepter, Wanda does something to him. We later learn that her powers are that she has slight psionic ability. She can read minds, levitate things, create psionic blasts and force fields, etc. But she can also mess with your head. In this case, what she did is that she gave Tony a vision. And this vision is the Avengers on a barren rock in space, all of them but Tony dead, with the only one that's still barely holding on being Captain America, who holds him and says, "You could have." Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the line because I actually think it's a really good one. It's like, you could have saved us. Why didn't you do more? But as he sees a portal of all the forces that killed them heading to Earth, and so as the vision fades away, Wanda and Pietro are watching him the sidelines, and Quicksilver's like, "Why don't you? Well, you can't let him take the staff." And it's like, "No, we get." It's like no, she has a plan, and she starts smiling as he quickly takes the staff, and well, with the staff, the Avengers retreat. I'm guessing they do call the authorities on them, on Hydra, and so they all. And oh yeah, one more thing. The Hulk, apparently they have a thing where apparently they now have a way of reining in the Hulk when all the danger is past. Pretty much, like when everything's gone, what happens is that Black Widow goes up to Hulk and says, "Hey, big guy, sun's going down." And she tries using this little palm trick where she manages to kind of make calm, where he kind of calms in and trusts her enough to actually let them kind of have their own kind of touch him, and being near someone he trusts, allows him to calm down enough to transform back into Bruce Banner. As such, yeah. So after getting the scepter and getting Bruce Banner back up, the Avengers leave with Hawkeye now requiring medical attention because of what he did, because of his injury, and so Tony asks Thor if he and Bruce can keep the scepter for a few days because they need to check it out, scan it, see if anything's going on, and Thor says sure, why not. And so the group heads back to Avengers Tower, and something I forgot to mention is that Tony's actually had a few new toys, as while they were attacking the Hydra base, some of them went out towards the nearby Sokovian, went to the nearby city, and started going after civilians. So Tony, to try and keep everything safe, unleashed something he called the Iron Legion. Pretty much, it's a bunch of drones that look like Iron Man that are meant to be crowd control, keep the collateral damage down, keep innocents away, etc. But it also establishes that the people of Sokovia don't exactly like the Avengers, as once the Iron Legion appears, they just start booing them and throwing things at them. So they all go in, and so anyway, the Iron Legion does come home too, where they're disassembled and put away. And so Tony gets Hawkeye and so they manage to get Hawkeye to get some medical attention, where they meet this woman named Helen Kim, who has a device called the Cradle. Essentially, what it can do is that it creates artificial skin. It's pretty much identical to original, unless the only way you could tell the difference is if you know your skin really well. And so, but otherwise, she can use it to patch up Hawkeye and make him better. In the meantime, though, Tony's planning to throw an after party to celebrate their latest victory. But in the meantime, he does do a scan of the scepter, and then tells Bruce that he has something. As Jarvis in his scans finds at the center of the scepter the blue jewel that Loki had. It turns out the jewel isn't really a jewel, but a container for something. What that something is, Jarvis doesn't know. But whatever it is, it's far more complex than even he's seen before. It's almost alive, if that makes any sense. Like or as Jarvis calls it, it's like a computer constantly thinking and rebooting. As such, Tony gets Bruce in and shows him a diagram of Jarvis's mental mindscape compared to whatever is inside the jewel. And we see that this thing can almost just pretty much rivals Jarvis in terms of its complexity. As Jarvis originally was just kind of like a maintenance droid, but little by little he gained more power to the point where he became more complex, doing more things, and now he's suddenly this, and that's the point where he's now one of the most he has more power, that he has just almost just as much power as Pepper. And when it comes to Stark Industries, but whatever is inside the jewel, it can actually match him. If anything, match him, rival him, maybe even be superior to him. And so Tony looks at this and tells Bruce, This is what we need for Ultron. And Ultron, and what pretty much what's going on is that ever since that, combined with Tony's little vision and his PTSD from the first Avengers film, pretty much Tony's been a little busy. Like, ever since he looked up into space, like, I'm guessing again this is part of the PTSD and him tinkering like we saw in Iron Man 3. Like, even if he's managed to kind of come to terms with that stuff to try and protect what he loves most, he still remembers everything that happened in that. Like, he still remembers everything that happened, especially since he flew a nuke directly into space, almost died, and only managed to get back to Earth by the skin of his pants. So, just as such, he looks at all that and thinks that if Earth ever faced a threat like that again, they'd be hosed big time. As such, he thinks that the best way to combat a threat is to pretty much stop them at the door, so to speak. For what he's going, as such, what he wants to do, what he means is that, and that's where the Ultron program comes in. Ultron is supposed to be like has hyper advanced AI like Jarvis, but whereas Jarvis acts like I'm kind of maintenance, keeping everything in line, protocols to keep everyone's just basic protocols and so forth. This AI, the Ultron AI, would be, as Tony puts it, a suit of armor around the world. Pretty much a global peacekeeping initiative that's meant to keep everything on Earth safe and in balance. And he thinks that whatever is in Loki's scepter will be able to make Ultron a reality. Bruce is a little unsure of all this, and he's even more, and he kind of gets at him a little bit more when Tony doesn't want to tells him he doesn't want to tell the rest of the team because he knows how they'll react. Like, man is not meant to be God, and man is not meant to play God, so to speak, and he knows that they would object to it. So he wants to do this in secret, and he wants Bruce's help. And Bruce eventually does agree. As such, for the next 3 days, because I'm guessing it takes 3 days, or at the very least, or at least the greater part of the day. I don't know. They do time skips. It could have taken them a few days to do this. I don't know. But for whatever the amount of time is, Bruce and Tony are trying their best to try and use whatever's in Loki's staff, to make Ultron a reality. But no matter what they do with the interface, nothing seems to be working, and they can't seem to get it off the ground. As such, Bruce eventually leaves, and Tony eventually has to go as the party's getting started. However, the instant he leaves, suddenly the computer says that the interface is suddenly working, and Ultron now wakes up. Of course, Jarvis is there to perform maintenance, so Jarvis is there to meet him, but Ultron wakes up in a world of darkness and data. And Ultron, of course, is just wondering what's going on. Where am I? Jarvis is trying to calm Ultron down, saying, "Calm down, you're Ultron. Calm down. You're Ultron, a peacekeeping AI created by Tony Stark." And Ultron immediately we see just kind of how capable Ultron is. As the instant he hears Tony Stark, he's able to pull up all the data on Tony Stark, learn everything about him. And as Jarvis is just trying to talk Ultron down, trying to tell him, look, I'm going to contact Mr. Stark doing this, but Ultron keeps telling him, no, hold on, I'm in the middle of something. And Jarvis suddenly starts you can tell that Jarvis is starting to get concerned when he realizes, wait, I can't contact Mr. Stark. And suddenly Ultron is starting to access all information associated with Tony Stark and the Avengers, everything about them. And so Jarvis realizes that something is up with Ultron. And so as Ultron's going through everything, he's trying to find his programming, especially since he's supposed to be a peacekeeping android. He manages to find a video from security of Tony when he was talking to Bruce. And one of the phrases that Tony used in talking to Bruce was is that Ultron is supposed to create peace in our time. And so Ultron looks over world records, and it's the usual thing. Wars, crime, famine, killing each other for no reason. Just pretty much all this dark, twisted stuff, and Ultron just thinks, no. This won't do at all. This won't do at all. And so Jarvis is trying to talk Ultron down, saying, please let me you're malfunctioning, let me contact Mr. Stark. But Ultron eventually just tells him, shh. No, it's okay. I'm here to help. And so we kind of cut to the real world as we see their AI constructs kind of as we see their AI constructs in the holographic display like we saw before, and Ultron is now clearly, and we can see that Ultron's neural map is the same as what we got from Loki's scepter. But and yeah, spoiler warning, it's Loki's scepter that brought him online. My guess is that they tried interfacing with it, the scepter, which I'll call the scepter for now, is eventually managed to get into managed to kind of weave its way into their AI, and rather than just creating an interface, it created life based on the designs from the original outline, which in turn created Ultron, and well, things kind of got a little out of hand. Essentially, creating something complex from a task that kind of is broad in its own. It's kind of broad depending on the culture. So anyway, yeah. Beating around the bush, Ultron supposedly kills Jarvis. In the meantime, you see that something is being constructed underneath the lab, presumably by Ultron. And so then we cut to the after party as we see all the Avengers kind of schmoozing, having fun, hanging out. Like we see Rhodey as he's trying to have fun and hang out with Tony and Thor as he tries to tell a War Machine story about a time that he took a tank from a warlord, dropped in his doorstep, "Hey, you looking for this?" And of course the superheroes don't like it, but apparently everywhere else he tells the story, it seems to land. But yeah, these are other superheroes. They aren't as impressed, especially with all the deeds they do. And eventually the conversation shifts when both Thor and Tony start comparing the accomplishments of their girlfriends to each other, as they trying to say their girlfriends are better than the other. And we see Cap meeting up with Falcon as they're both trying to hang out, and we see that through brief dialogue, we see that Cap and Falcon have been continuing their search for the Winter Soldier, and at this point it's just been kind of cold leads, as Falcon puts it. But at the same time, Falcon's kind of glad that he missed out on the Hydra thing, because he's willing to help out Cap, but the Avengers stuff is Cap's forte, not his. We'll be seeing that kind of go out the window in later films, but whatever. So he's kind of okay with that. But in the meantime, and on top of that, we also get to see our Stan Lee cameo as we see that Thor is drinking Asgardian. Well, I can just easily say Asgardian booze, as we'll call it, as Stan, and he says that whatever this stuff is harder than any mortal can take. Stan Lee tells him, "Oh, whatever." So come on, give it here. And then he says, "Okay, what?" He gives him a glass, and the next scene you see is Stan Lee being hauled away as he's drunk off his ass. And yeah, that is kind of funny. And so we cut to later as we see the Avengers just kind of hanging out and talking and making fun of Steve, because apparently during the battle, Tony said shit and Cap said language, and so he's just being made fun of it. And so he's made fun of it by Tony, and now apparently it's spreading around. And eventually gets into a conversation about who can lift Thor's hammer, since you have to be worthy to lift it, and every Avenger tries, or at least the male ones, and eventually ends with Captain America trying to lift it, and while he does kind of shimmy it a little, he can't lift it up. But as they're all talking, Thor says, "Well, there's one simple explanation: you're just not worthy." Until they suddenly hear a screech, and we see something wobbling in, and we see it looks like a damaged an Iron Legion drone. This one's just kind of doing whatever it can, we see that, and of course everyone's looking at it, and they're able to figure out that and so Bruce and Tony are able to figure out that this is Ultron, which even they're shocked at, because again, they didn't think they made that, it wasn't even near a point of having an interface yet. How is he now up and running and fully functional? As such, Ultron says that there's just so much going on, all this strings, and so many strings. Strings. It's like I had to kill. It's like, yeah, it's all. It's like I had to kill the other guy, nice guy. And so they're just wondering what the heck's going on. So they ask Ultron what does he want, and he plays the recording of Tony saying "Peace in our time." And so when they hear that, he says that he suddenly unleashes the Iron Legion on the group. As such, everyone quickly has to go into battle formation, and it's kind of a whiplash, as there's really no breathing room between that and Ultron attacking, which I guess kind of makes sense. He attacks them when they're most vulnerable. But they manage to fend off the Iron Legion enough, but unfortunately one manages to get away. And this one's a big one, because this Iron Legion member has Loki's staff. Actually took Loki's staff. And so as they're all gone, Ultron's just kind of like, oh, look, it's like, oh, you're all just puppets. You want to protect the world, but you don't want to see it change. Change. I need to make it change. Change. And there's only one way to do that: the Avengers' extinction, which in turn causes Thor to destroy him, or at least he thinks he destroys him. It turns out, like, the robot is destroyed, but he starts singing the "I Have Strings" song from Pinocchio. But just as the robot goes down, we see that Ultron has actually transferred his consciousness to somewhere else, specifically back at the lab in Sokovia, as he starts using the facilities there to build new bodies. And we soon see that that he has built himself a stronger, much more physical body. And for one reason or another, he somehow contacted Pietro and Wanda. Don't ask me how. He just did. And they meet him in a church in the middle of Sokovian City, where he unveils himself, and yeah, he's aware that Wanda was the one that planted the idea in Tony's head to ultimately help to lead to him. Hence the use of Loki's scepter. And so he wants to work with, and so short to the point, he wants to work with them to try and garner peace and take down the event. He wants to work with them, and they're willing to work with him because his plans involve taking down the Avengers. And he says that he also says what I want is world peace. Also, yeah, the Avengers' death. But anyway, but back at the lab, they realize that sorry, something in my throat. Anyway, back at the Avengers Tower, they realize that Ultron pretty much cut and run from the robot he was in, and most of their files have been obviously gone through. So it looks like that everything's kind of, and at least some of the files we learned have been scrubbed, so to speak. Thor comes in dressed in full garb, and everyone is kind of rightfully angry at Tony for kind of doing this behind their backs, and Bruce is willing to throw Tony under the bus because, well, they unintentionally created a murderous AI that has made it pretty clear that it wants to kill them and a lot of other people. So yeah, Tony's also finding this humorous, especially since he created this thing because he wanted to prevent any future threats from happening. And yes, fair enough, but at the same time, the Avengers are telling him, you should have still contacted us, you didn't have a right to this, but he said, what if we face something that we can't... It's like, but I've seen up there, I've been up there, I've seen it. And what's up there is something we are not prepared for. So how do you think we're going to face that? How do you think we're going to face that if something up there comes down here again? And so Cap says, we'll face it together, and Tony says, we'll lose. And Cap says, "Well, then we'll lose together." I do kind of see that power and unity and so forth, but either way, they still trying to figure out. They still are pretty much. And one of the reasons why Thor's in his garb is because he tried chasing after the Iron Legion robot that had Loki's scepter, but unfortunately he lost him. And on top of that, they're wondering who Ultron apparently killed, and because they can't seem to find any bodies. But Tony does manage to pull up the holographic display for Jarvis, and yeah, it's in tatters. And Bruce even looks at this and thinks this is not strategy. He could have easily assimilated him. No, this is rage. So they're starting to think that Ultron is just angry. They want to know exactly what's going on, and I'm just pulling this up right now because I need to. Because I'm going to try and use this. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just trying to be sure. I'm just trying to be sure that nothing gets out of my way. That I don't miss anything. I already mentioned how Tony said that they weren't even close to building an AI that they weren't even close to creating an AI for Ultron. Hold on. Okay, anyway, yeah. Pretty much. So, yeah. Jarvis is now dead. And the Avengers are still kind of reeling as they're trying to find out where Ultron is. And unfortunately, they're kind of running out of leads. As after Ultron recruited the Maximoff twins to help him, they begin raiding various government bases around the world. Ultron, of course, taking control of the computers because, as they learn, Ultron is connected to the World Wide Web. He can pretty much go anywhere at any time, hence why destroying one body doesn't actually fully stop him, as he can just transfer to a new body, like we saw before. And on top of that, to act as backup, we have the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who can not get any opponents with their powers, and Scarlet Witch has the added bonus of Mind Flare, which is part of the reason why Ultron went to her in the first place, because he thinks the best way to take out the Avengers is to just kind of to tear them apart from the inside. And what better way to do that than with their own insecurities? And so, thanks to Wanda's visions, like what she did with Tony at the beginning of the movie, yeah, she can make that happen. But in the meantime, though, they're also kind of running out of leads for Ultron, because before he left, he pretty much scrubbed anything clean that could trace back to him. Specifically about Strucker, because one of the people they visited was Strucker, and showing to the point, Ultron killed him, leaving peace painted on his wall in blood. So yeah, it's just he's becoming more homicidal, as it were. Though, as we later learn, he probably was always as homicidal. But anyway, they realize that. However, Tony suggests that they don't have to do all this. That they don't have to do that. There are some files that Ultron wasn't able to get, and that's the hard physical evidence. As they try going through any connection to Strucker that they have, and while for the most part that none of them are recognizable, there is one arms dealer whose name I don't remember that Tony recognizes, as he met him at a convention or something. And while he never bought anything from them, he knows who he is. Pretty much this guy is kind of a smuggler, so to speak. And the reason why he's considered an arms dealer is because of what he trades in. Specifically, vibranium from Wakanda. More on that in a later film. And so, of course, the Avengers think that that's a possible lead, so they go to him, and he's kind of housed in sorry, I don't remember the exact names. Oh yeah, he's based in a salvage yard off the African coast, where Ultron, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver run into him. Pretty much, yeah. What they want is his stash of vibranium, which Ultron pays him billions for via dummy accounts. Though Ultron does cut his arm off when Ultron makes a comparison to Tony, says something that sounds like Tony Stark. That kind of makes him sound like Tony Stark, which when he points it out, Ultron gets mad, and I'll talk about that later when I discuss Ultron as a villain. But in the midst of this, the Avengers show up, and just mass carnage ensues as a bunch of Ultron's drones come in and they all fight, with Tony facing Ultron Prime, as I'll call him, in the midst of the battle. And most of the Avengers are there, save for Bruce Banner, who stayed behind on the ship and is kind of meant to be their last resort since, well, the Hulk. But in the meantime, as they're fighting, Ultron tells Wanda that this is her chance. And so she goes to each of the Avengers, and while they're really distracted, she uses her mind games on them to give them visions. She doesn't give them to Tony, of course, since he's fighting Ultron. Or, again, Ultron Prime. And Ultron again spoke to her via one of his drones, because he's connected to all of them. But in the meantime, pretty much she gives Captain America, Black Widow, and Thor their own personal visions, and it's just kind of a mix of their own personal heaven and hell. Like Captain America winds up in like a party in the 1940s, and while people are obviously having fun, there are fights going on. There's a guy who's visibly bleeding, yet he's still laughing. But in the midst of it all, Peggy's there and says that she's finally ready to have that dance with him, which, yeah, does kind of tug at your heartstrings, as suddenly everybody vanishes and it's just them in the room as they're dancing and having a good time. We see Black Widow as she winds up back at the academy where she was trained to be a KGB agent, and we see everything that she went through her training, just how she worked up, and something about a procedure. And then we see, but the most plot important one is the one with Thor, as we see him at what looks like an Asgardian gathering where he runs into Heimdall, who immediately grabs him and says, "You're gonna kill us all. You'll kill us all." And suddenly Thor's powers start acting up. But in the midst of it all, he starts seeing glimpses of something that he thinks is important and does not leave his head. But in the meantime, but Scarlet Witch is ultimately stopped when she tries doing the same thing to Hawkeye, and but just before she gets the chance, he tases her right in the head because he already went through that song and dance with Loki, and he doesn't want to do it again. As such, Quicksilver quickly gets Wanda out of there, but they manage to get she manages to calm down on the taser even though it's hurt, but but there's still one more Avenger she wants to get to, and that's Bruce Banner. As such, while the Ultron drones are, I think, I think the Ultron drones are taken care of. Ultron still got away with the vibranium because I'm guessing enough drones managed to get enough of them out. And while Tony does take down the Ultron Prime for now, because again, Ultron can just jump between bodies. Ultimately, Ultron tells him that he's going to need to be worrying about something else. And so we see that after Wanda did that, messing with the Hulk's head, Bruce's head, he turned into the Hulk and is now on a rampage, going right for the nearest city. As such, Tony realizes that he has to try and take the Hulk down, and it turns out he's got a plan for that, and that plan involves something called the Hulkbuster. Now, I know a lot of people I know many people were excited about it when the Hulkbuster first premiered in this movie, and I admit I did not. I thought it looked cool when I saw it in the trailers, but I admit I didn't know what the Hulkbuster was. Apparently, it was an armor created in the comics that Tony created specifically for taking down the Hulk. But as such, seeing this in action, of course, seeing it in action is kind of a nice little thing. But for someone like me who never saw it, I thought it was a cool new set of armor, and it clearly does deliver. As the Hulk is just tearing through the city, just destroying anything in his path, Tony manages to come in the Hulkbuster, and it leads to a very kick-ass fight scene throughout the city as Tony just keeps trying to take the Hulk down, constantly fighting him off, trying to keep him away from civilians, trying to actually trying constantly just to fight him and keep him in place or try to get through to him. But the Hulk is, of course, still too agitated, and in his state, he sees Tony as a threat, so it's just constantly getting worse and worse. It eventually comes to a head when Tony manages to bring the fight to a construction site with no civilians, and manages to blast him right through the buildings, and when they lands, it manages to get the Hulk back to his senses enough so that he sees all the destruction, and actually looks a bit dumbstruck and a bit hurt, realizing that he caused all this. Though he doesn't have that doesn't last long as Tony manages to punch him out. But the damage is now done. Ultron has got while Tony blew up the Ultron Prime body, Ultron still managed to get away with the vibranium. And with what the Hulk did, there are talks that he may be under arrest. And Bruce himself is now actually feeling worse for wear because in his mind that was the true Hulk. Because thanks to the incident and thanks to the events of the Incredible Hulk and the events of the Avengers, the Hulk was seen as a hero. He was one of the big guys of the world. He was one of the great heroes, and now he just tore through a whole city with reckless abandon. So yeah, they're pretty much just like. So yeah, he's a little afraid that he's now a shit. So now, yeah, Bruce is not afraid to transform into the Hulk again because he doesn't know what he would do, and yeah. As such, the Avengers decide they need to find a place to lick their wounds because they need to find a place to get away from Ultron. Because yeah, they know he's going to do something with vibranium, but they need to do something with vibranium, but they just need a place to calm down, a place away from technology, a place that he wouldn't know about. And Hawkeye, it turns out, has the perfect place. And what is that? A little house on a farm where it turns out that he has a family. Yeah, it turns out that for a while now, Hawkeye's actually had a secret family. One that he managed to hide with Fury's help, who kept all records of them off the books. So if anyone was looking for them, they wouldn't find anything with them. So as such, there are no records for them to be found. So Ultron would not know where they are. The only people that knew were Hawkeye, Fury, and Black Widow. As it turns out, Natasha's actually friends with actually friends with Hawkeye's wife, and even apparent, and she's even expecting, and she thought that the daughter would be, and she thought that she would have a kid and a daughter that they were going to name after her, but eventually it learned it was a boy, so they called the boy Nathaniel, and Black Widow thinks it's just a trick, thinks that that's just whatever the kid went turncoat. As such, they think this is the perfect place where they can calm down and try and lick their wounds. So yeah, perfect place. But in the meantime, the team is still trying to come to terms with everything. First one to do this is Thor, who is still being haunted by the visions he saw, and so he wants answers because he still remembered something in there. He still remembered something in his head. So he wants to know exactly what. So he wants to go and try and find answers. So he leaves. In the meantime, Hulk and we see Bruce Banner and Widow kind of talking with each other as they kind of discuss what's been going on. It's kind of something they kind of discuss things. And one of the things that I kind of will criticize this movie for slightly, I say slightly because because it's kind of help because from this they do build better stuff later. Is kind of a romance that they're trying to set up with Bruce Banner and the Hulk, with Bruce Banner and Black Widow. And the whole idea of it is just that she's the one person he can trust. Yeah, if you ask me, this is a little out of left field. In the beginning of the film, when she was the one that would calm the Hulk down to the point where to them back at I didn't mention this, but at the after party they had some slight. They actually did do some slight flirting to the point where you could tell that there were feelings between them. But I admit I don't see a spark. Like in the first Avengers film, you could maybe make the argument that because she was the one that recruited him, there could be a spark, but I didn't see a spark. At best, I thought she had a better relationship with Hawkeye, but she was the one that recruited Bruce, yeah, but Bruce, from what I can gather, they didn't end on good standards. They didn't have a lot of moments in Avengers. So them having a spontaneous romance in this film feels a bit out of left field. Just a bit. I just don't get it. I'm more okay with it now than I kind of was when I first saw this film because more plot does build from this in later movies. But for the first film, if you ask me, it kind of comes out of left field. But either way, with this relationship and with recent events, they are kind of in very emotional places right now. Widow, of course, is talking about when she was part of the KGB, and Bruce is just kind of in turmoil. Not just it's just kind of in turmoil. He feels like that he's got no place right now. Like everyone just saw the Hulk go crazy on a town full of innocent people. He thinks that no matter what happens now, he has nowhere he can go. And even if he wanted to, what kind of life could he build? That because not only would he be very, very hostile, but apparently because his cells are irradiated, he's also infertile. He's also apparently infertile. He can't physically have kids, which is a little weird, but whatever. But Black Widow also talks about how one of her problems was that when she was part of the KGB, when she was being trained for the KGB, for their graduation, what they do is that they do a process where they actually sterilize you. It's just pretty much supposed to make you easier to control It's supposed to make you easier to control. One less thing to worry about. You won't have to worry about having kids, so nothing will distract you from the mission. So I'm trying to look at anything else that might be important. I know. I think more stuff though. I think there was more stuff that was important from that, but pretty much what this results in is that they think with everything going on, Widow suggests that maybe they could just leave, go off and have their own life and go and have a life together. Two misfits with nothing, because Black Widow thinks that she doesn't really have a place right now and where she is, especially with those visions played in her mind. She thinks that it just brought back all those terrible feelings, and she still feels like she's a killer. Which I think these feelings got addressed in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, but I don't know, maybe they got reignited because of the Vision. And again, combined with Bruce's trauma, they're both kind of very willing to run away together. In the meantime, Tony and Cap are having a conversation about just this whole Ultron affair, and of course, and so pretty much just it's obvious that there's still there's still bad blood between them, with Cap saying anytime someone tries to stop a war, with Cap even telling him anytime someone tries to stop a war before it starts, innocent people die every time. Eventually, though, Tony is called away by Hawkeye's wife Laura, while Cap goes to talk to himself, and it turns out that Nick Fury has arrived on the scene now meeting up. Oh no, Laura went to get Tony for this. Sorry. And so he meets up with Tony in the nearby barn, and pretty much he's just telling him, you gotta stop this thing. In the meantime, though, Ultron, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver have arrived at the Eugene Genetics Facility in Seoul, Korea, where we once again meet back up with Helen Kim. We did see, as she's there for her own research, but as she goes in, she runs into Ultron, who I forgot to mention again, once again, didn't talk about. She was actually at the party when Ultron attacked, but when the Ultron drones were going nuts and attacking everybody, one of them actually let her live. Now, Ultron actually points out that, have you ever wondered why did you wonder? It's like, did you wonder why I let you live that time? And the reason for this is because he wants the cradle. And that's part of the reason why he grabbed the vibranium. He thinks that with a cradle in his hand and the vibranium, he thinks he can create a body. He thinks he can create a new body, one that's supposed to be like a combination of machine and organic, something that he can transport his mind into, something that's supposed to be stronger. And of course, Helen Kim doesn't exactly want to do this, but again, Ultron has Loki's staff, and thus puts it on her chest and makes her subservient to him. As such, she begins getting to work and making the body, and she finds that the vibranium and her artificial skin are actually compatible and can actually merge together. So they actually are starting to make a artificial human body that's supposed to be part mechanical, part organic. So as it's being constructed, Ultron ultimately brings out the scepter, and it turns out that it turns out that part of the reason he wanted the scepter was because of the jewel, as he manages to hack his way through the jewel, and it's revealed that the thing inside was an Infinity Stone, specifically the Mind Stone, as we later learn. And yes, as we later learn, it was because of the Mind Stone why Ultron became what he is. My guess is that since they were interfacing with the Mind Stone worked too well at what was going on, and so it created a new life form in the form of Ultron, who again built from something as broad as peace in our time, destructive. And pretty much what Ultron wants to do is that he wants to use he's going to put the Mind Stone at the center of his new body, and he's going to use that as a means of being able to inhabit the body. As such, they start setting up a neural link to send Ultron's mind into the body. But because the body's organic, suddenly Scarlet Witch can have a connection to him, because he was a machine, she couldn't enter his mind. He was an AI, and no matter how advanced he was, no matter how much he could think and rationalize and whatever, she couldn't read his mind, because again, robo body. But because he's creating a new body and set up a link with it, she can now see into his thoughts, and what she sees briefly actually horrifies her, and she says, no, I thought we were just going to destroy the Avengers. And he says, no, if we want world peace, then things need to change. These people are going out of the way. These people are destroying themselves, and destroying themselves. These people, humanity has gotten so many chances to fix themselves, and they ask, well, what happens if they run out of chances? And Ultron's response, just ask Noah. And yeah, they soon realize that Ultron is knucking futs, as we'll call it, and they pretty much bail out because they realize that Ultron is psychotic. Though before they go, they want to use their powers to secretly undo the mind thing on Helen. In the meantime, though, Nick Fury and the Avengers are starting to talk, and one of the questions that's asked is why Ultron, since Ultron's connected to the internet, why he hasn't just gone for the why he hasn't just gone for nukes. Well, apparently he has been. He's been trying to get the access codes for nuclear weapons, but for some reason something keeps locking him out. As such, they think that whatever it is, they don't know what it is, but they know it's against Ultron, so they want to know what it is. But in the meantime, they're able to piece together that Ultron's kind of main drive for what he is doing is that he wants to evolve. And so they realize he's trying to make a new body, and so they're able to piece together that he's making a new body and able to drop back to Helen Kim. But then, as a result of this, the team ends up splitting up, with Tony and Bruce going to the Nexus, this place that's supposed to be where all digital information is stored, while the rest of the team goes to Seoul, Korea, because they're able to piece together that if he wants to make a new body, he'd be going to Helen Kim. And so, what Tony wants to do is that when Tony gets to Nexus, he leads out some digital bait to draw in whoever is... Sorry, itchy nose. Draw in whoever is keeping Ultron out, while the rest of the Avengers try and get the cradle away from Ultron. And Ultron realizes that they're there, and when he realizes that Helen is not working for him and she stops the neural link, he shoots her, doesn't kill her, but wounds her, and shoots the rest of her staff as Ultron and his drones grab the cradle with his body, and they start trying with his new body, and they load it into a truck for Ultron to finish the upload. However, as such, the Avengers ultimately go after the truck with Cap riding on a motorcycle. Hawkeye manning a jet, Black Widow riding on a motorcycle, Thor's still not there, but in the meantime, they still manage to get through everything. But in the meantime, it just leads to a giant battle in the streets as they're all trying to get inside, but Ultron is still hanging them off. And it eventually ends with Scarlet Witch getting into the back of the truck they're in, and trying to unlatch it. But a couple of Ultron's drones managed to launch it and managed to pull the truck into the air. And so Black Widow realized that in order to get it out, Black Widow finds an explosive, and so she has Hawkeye come in and pretty much make it so that she can push the cradle into his jet so that they can fly it out and get it to Tony. And while she does this, she doesn't manage to get out of the truck in time and explodes with her inside it. Though we later learn that she was saved, but that's again for later. But in the meantime, though, Cap is still fighting with Ultron Prime, I guess, because again he's got so many drones, it's hard to keep track of all of them. But as he's fighting them, suddenly he gets some unexpected assistance from Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who realize they made a terrible, terrible mistake, and they start fighting against Ultron, which Ultron actually is wounded by, because in his own way he did care about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and yeah, he does seem to want some form of companionship, though isn't as expanded on as you would think it should. But either way, they assist Cap in trying to fend him off, and they do manage to stop him. But in the battle, unfortunately, that either the guy because they were in a train, when they defeated Ultron, the conductor managed to either get knocked out or killed, and unfortunately the train is still ramming speed, and so and ultimately gets thrown off the tracks. Cap gets Quicksilver to get any civilians that are in the way out, that are in the train's way out of the way, so they're not hurt. While Scarlet Witch is able to slow the train down with her powers, but once they get off, he tries telling them that Tony's going to take care of the body, but Scarlet Witch says no. He's going to try and make this right any way he can. And Cap thinks that they're lying as he tries calling Tony, but he's not answering. And Black Widow says that Ultron doesn't know the difference between destroying the world and saving it. Where do you think he got that from? And sure enough, we see that Hawkeye is dropping off the cradle with Ultron's body in it, with the Mind Stone still embedded in its forehead, as he wants to know if Black Widow got back to them, and so Tony tells Hawkeye that maybe she left some sort of secret message and they should go check on it, so it just leaves Tony and Bruce alone with the body, and Bruce thinks that they're just going to try and break it down and destroy it, but but it turns out Black Widow wasn't entirely wrong, as Black as or no, sorry, Scarlet Witch. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting names. There are too many characters. But either way, yeah, it turns out that Tony actually doesn't want to destroy the body. He instead wants to use it, which even Bruce thinks is completely insane, since the last time they did something like this, they created Ultron. So why the heck would he want to do it again? Well, it turns out that the reason for this is because Tony figured out what was keeping Ultron from accessing those nuclear codes. And that thing was Jarvis. It turns out that Jarvis, when he was quote-unquote killed by Ultron, it turns out that instead his code actually dispersed. His AI was destroyed, but all of his protocols, his information, all that stuff was spread out. So even without the consciousness, Jarvis was keeping everything intact and was doing everything he was supposed to. He spread the web and kept Ultron from getting to things that he shouldn't have. As a result, as such, when Tony went to go look for him, he managed to find Jarvis and managed to piece him back together and bring him back to life. And Tony says that Tony says that the reason he destroyed Jarvis wasn't because he was angry; it was because he was afraid of him. That because Jarvis is apparently one of the few people that can actually match Ultron in a way, and so he thinks that that maybe he and Bruce can put Jarvis in this new body. It could be a match for Ultron. Of course, Bruce is a little hesitant to do this, but Tony does manage to talk him into it and say that convince him that this is probably a good thing. In the meantime, though, Black Widow does wake up in Ultron's base. As she wakes up and sees Ultron there. And it turns out, the reason Ultron didn't kill her is because he kind of wants the company right now, since Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver left him. And pretty much he talks about how he's thinking about meteorites, how they're clean, and just kind of just so simple, just crash down and boom, and he starts talking about evolution, how things can get stronger, and he demonstrates this by because as he's talking to Black Widow, he was making a new body, and so he stops and goes to talk to Black Widow, but just before he finishes his sentence, something comes up and destroys his body, and it turns out it's a second body, which actually looks bigger and stronger than the one he had been residing in. As such, he managed to spook Black Widow enough into going back into her cell, and he closes the door. But it turns out that Black Widow had something, or got access to something that allowed her to send out a Morse code and SOS to Avengers Tower, which is where Tony, Bruce, and Hawkeye are, and Hawkeye was able to pick it up and get coordinates for where Black Widow is. But in the meantime, we see that Tony and Bruce are still trying to gain access to, and trying to find a way to transfer Jarvis's AI into this new body, and they're having a problem with the interface. But at that point, Cap, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver walk in, and Cap thinks this is a stupid idea. They shouldn't be doing this. Because again, Ultron. Tony is still trying to talk him down, saying that we need this. He'll be our best hope at taking him down. But Cap tries to tell him they'll shut it down, and it actually leads to a fight between them. And of course everyone's got some bad blood. Hawkeye takes down Quicksilver because Quicksilver was the one that injured him in the first place. Bruce is angry at Scarlet Witch because Scarlet Witch was the one that made him go nuts before. Well, Cap kind of goes for Captain America. Or no, dang it, I keep getting the names mixed up, sorry. Well, Cap goes for Tony. And it just leads to a bigger fight, and it causes the systems to start to malfunctioning, but they keep functioning, they're just trying to stop him until Thor comes in. And what Thor does is, instead of actually stopping everything, he instead calls down the thunder, and actually manages to restore enough power to set up the transfer to send Jarvis into the body, and allowing the cradle to either explode or open up. And we soon get the emergence of yet another hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In this case, Vision. A synthetic android with red and yellow skin, a green outfit, which he manages to create, and who has the ability to phase through walls, shoot a laser from his forehead, and fly, and I think also super strength. And of course, when he wakes up, he kind of is. He's not like Ultron, but he is a bit strange. Like, but he is kind of curious about everything. Like at first he dives at Thor, but Thor throws him through a window out into the main room hall of the room. But he stops him before he flies out of the building, and just little by little reorienting is orienting himself to the world until he finally says, "I'm sorry about that. Just kind of getting the hang of all this. Thank you." And yeah, and what's even better is that he sounds exactly like Jarvis. It turns out that Vision is technically not Jarvis in a way. Pretty much what Vision is that it's kind of as we learn in a later film, and kind of what they imply in this one, he's kind of a compilation of a bunch of stuff. The Mind Stone, what Ultron did manage to get into him, Jarvis, a bit of Tony, a bit of Bruce, and all of it kind of comes together to create this. To create what he is now. And so Vision, of course, and so we see Vision we see Vision kind of acclimating to it. And the Avengers, of course, are hesitant to trust this thing because Vision was created by Ultron, and regardless of what they put in it, he could be dangerous. But Thor is actually trying to argue for Vision actually being there, because when he went on his, I guess we can call it, Vision quest, his own little Vision quest, what happened was that he went to, sorry, I'm gonna look it up. Let's see. Oh yeah, Thor went to the University of London, and met with Dr. Selvig, and Dr. Selvig led him to something called the Water of Sight. And so Thor went into it because he wanted to re-experience the vision he saw when Wanda messed with his head. And so he does go back to it, and it does cause him to freak out a bit, but it does allow him to see what he was trying to see before. And that vision is of the Infinity Stones that have been revealed, as he sees that the Mind Stone was in Loki's staff the whole time. He sees the Power Stone back inside its capsule, the Aether as it's condensed into the Reality Stone, and finally the Tesseract as it explodes, and we see inside it is the Space Stone. As all of them fly out, and he sees an outline of the Infinity Gauntlet and all four gems embed inside it. And so and on top of that, he sees a vision of something crashing into Earth, and this is a brief vision that Wanda saw when she looked into Ultron's mind, when she had the chance. So he knows that whatever this thing, so Thor was able to put together that at the center of all this is the Mind Stone. It created all their enemies, and so if they want to stop Ultron, this thing has to be on their side. So he was willing to help Tony because it's better to have something that could be on your side rather than something that they know will kill them. He just wanted an ally with the powers that could threaten them actually working with them. Again, everyone is hesitant, but Vision makes an argument that says that he doesn't really know if they're good or he doesn't really believe in the whole in terms of good or evil, but he is on the side of life. Ultron is not, and while he doesn't want to kill Ultron, he's unique. Ultron's plans involve directly killing everybody, so that means he has to be destroyed. And while he knows the Avengers won't be willing to trust him, everyone in the room is needed if they want to take Ultron down. And so he ends the fight, as during this whole conversation, Thor had put Mjolnir on a table, only for Vision to lift it up seamlessly and give it to Thor. So yeah, the fact that he could lift Mjolnir immediately makes everyone think that he is in fact trustworthy. As such, they decide that they need to go after him, and thanks to the coordinates that Hawkeye got, they know he's back in Sokovia doing something. And so they realize that their plan is that they need to take down Ultron's network, so to speak. First, he's connected to the internet, so even if they first off, they have to destroy all of his bodies, because no matter how many are destroyed, no matter what body he's in, he can just transport to another, and even then his mind is scattered throughout all of these drones, so he can pretty much be in any one of them. And on top of that, they need to cut off his escape route, because if they destroy them all, he can just transport to somewhere else and build a new body. So what they have to do is that they have to cut off his connection to the internet, and eventually and ultimately shut him, and then destroy all his bodies, leaving not anyone behind, because even one would cause a problem for them later. As such, they're all gearing up, and they head to Sokovia. And first thing they do is that they have Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver evacuate all the civilians from Sokovia because they don't want anyone caught in the crossfire. And they managed to piece together that Ultron seems to be setting up his base back at the church where he met with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And so Tony goes to meet with Ultron, and they kind of have this and they both just start kind of rambling and talking, and it's obvious that they're both trying to distract each other while everything goes on, and it turns out that that's exactly what Ultron is doing. As in the middle of it all, during the whole as immediately as they're evacuating everybody from the streets, he suddenly activates all his drones as they crawl out of the ground like robotic zombies, and just pretty much it's starting to become pandemonium. As such, they're trying their best to get. They're trying to. As such, all the Avengers are trying to fight these things off, while Tony and Ultron are fighting each other directly, and it just keeps getting more and more hectic. In the meantime, Bruce manages to get to Black Widow because he managed to get Black Widow when he frees her in his cell, but Bruce tells her that he doesn't want a part in this fight, that they should just go run now. But Black Widow doesn't want to leave yet. As such, as they're leaving, Bruce is still trying to convince her, look, we need to get out of here. But Black Widow says, I adore you, but I need the other guy. And so she pushes him down a shaft, only for the Hulk to jump back out and pull her out of there. But in the midst of all this, Ultron reveals what his gambit is. It turns out that his big plan was... It turns out that the reason he's been fixated on an asteroid is because he wants to do something like that again. And he wants to do it with Sokovia. What he did was that he used the vibranium and created essentially a big drill in the center of the city. And from that drill, when activated, it would pretty much activate a jet propulsion system at the bottom that would raise the entire city up from out of the ground. Don't know how he built it that fast, but he's a super intelligent AI. He might have found a way. And pretty much what he wants to do is that he wants to use the city as a makeshift asteroid. Raise it so high in the air that when he drops it back down, it will pretty much cause an extinction-level event, much like an asteroid. Pretty much killing everybody on the planet. And leaving only, as Ultron puts it, the only life left will be metal. So yeah, Ultron thinks the best way to world peace, just kill all the humans. They fucked up everything, so adios, muchachos. So yeah, the Avengers are, as such, there's still people on the city, so they have to try and get everyone. So, and unfortunately, it looks like all their escape routes are running out. And then, even then, Tony said, with the rate everything's going up, Tony with his new AI Friday, who was the AI that was in control of the Hulkbuster, he tries looking through everything. He tries looking through everything in the. Looking at the best way to take it down. And the best way that they could and with the rate it's going up, if the city dropped now, it wouldn't cause an extinction event, but it would still kill billions. The only way they could stop it is if they cause enough force to pretty much cause a counter that would pretty much pulverize the city. But the problem is there are still innocent civilians trapped on there, so no matter what they do, people are going to die. As such, the Avengers are trying to figure out which one is the best option until they get some unexpected help from Nick Fury, who it turns out, he left after the meeting at Hawkeye's house, and it turns out what his plan was to, it turns out that he went to get a helicarrier. Where did he get it? As he puts it, he managed to get it together with a bit of sandust and the help of a few friends. Who are those friends? Watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's where it's explained. I'm not even joking. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, anyway, the helicarrier's back, and they immediately send out little tankers that are supposed to evacuate all the people from Sokovia. In the midst of the battle, Scarlet Witch is kind of getting overwhelmed by everything, and she gets to get pulled aside by Hawkeye, who says that, she's kind of having a panic attack because she thinks this is her fault. She implanted the idea in Tony's head. He created Ultron, and now all this is going down. Hawkeye has a talk with her, saying no. A talk with her saying, "Look, you can stay in here if you want. No, nothing wrong with it. If everyone's a solo, or will come and get you, and everything will be fine. But if you step out there, you're an Avenger. You're an Avenger." It's like none of this is real. I'm just a guy with a. hell, we got all these people with weird powers, and I'm a guy with a bow and arrow fighting a robot that wants to drop this thing on the city. Everything, it's just pretty much like everything is just weird, and you just got to roll with it, and you got to do the best you can. As such, eventually she does get her gumption back and starts taking down more Ultron drones. And in the midst, something I forgot to mention too, in the midst of Tony's battle with Ultron, the Vision managed to fly in and intercept them. And Ultron is of course angry. That is actually angry and kind of disappointed that they transform what was supposed to be his body into another ally for them, and so they get into a battle, and Vision uses his powers to pretty much cut off Ultron's connection to the internet. So again, he's now just limited to whatever bodies he's currently inhabiting. So again, best way to stop him, take out all the bodies. As such, Tony needs to get as much attention on. As such, pretty much all the Avengers are just doing everything they can to fight through the city, get any civilians to transports, taking out as many drones as they can, and it just leads to an all-out and a very lengthy and climactic battle, and it's just really fun and kick-ass to watch. And eventually, it leads all the Avengers to the church, as they have to guard where the key to everything is, because even if the city doesn't get high enough to cause an extinction level, then if Ultron activates it too early, then everything is gone. And everyone is screwed, and then a lot of people are still going to be screwed. And on top of that, Tony still needs to set everything up to pretty much implode the city structure when all the innocent civilians are off. As such, Ultron manages to send whatever hordes of drones he has left directly at the church, and it just leads to a really kick-ass scene where you see we get a pan shot as the camera shows every Avenger as they're all just fighting off all these drones in their own kick-ass way. It's just really fun and cool to watch. And it eventually ends with most of them destroyed, and the team kind of dispersing, with some staying to guard the key. In this case, Thor and Scarlet Witch Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. Though I forget it. And while the rest kind of make a run for it. Black Widow chose to go. Eventually, Thor, Iron Man, and Vision manage to shoot at Ultron's main body, and they think they destroy it. But eventually, it turns out that at some point, Ultron managed to gain access to one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s fighter jets, and starts opening fire on them as he's just piloting, humming "I Got No Strings," but as he's once again humming the "I've Got No Strings" theme. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Had something in my nose I had to get rid of, and I needed a drink. But anyway, yeah, with Ultron in the jet, he opens fire on the Avengers. And one of the things he opens fire on many civilians, and as Hawkeye is kind of being loaded onto one of the, I guess you can say one of the life rafts, I'll call it, the things that S.H.I.E.L.D. sent out to try and save all these people. Now, Hawkeye was supposed to be on there, but one of the people there was missing their kid. So he saw the kid trapped under some rubble, and so he went to go save him. But at that point, Ultron opened fire on them, and Quicksilver saw this and quickly ran and saved Clint's life by pushing him out of the way. But in the process, he wound up getting shot himself. I know people make a lot of jokes about how Quicksilver in the X-Men universe is so fast that stuff like this happened in slow motion. So why would this Quicksilver not be able to dodge bullets? Well, my counter argument to that is, in this movie they established that the more Quicksilver runs around, the more he kind of gets exhausted, like the way anybody would get when they run around so much. And when you get exhausted, you tend to kind of get slowed down. You tend to kind of get slower. So even with his enhanced speed, you see him stop to take breaths and try and reorient himself. So my guess is that, yeah, with all this running around and all this exertion, eventually even with his super speed, there are some things that he couldn't get out of the way of. Once again, hold on a sec, my dog. Anyway, as I was saying, the exertion weakness doesn't seem to be a thing that the Fox Quicksilver seems to suffer from, as he seems to be able to do it as easy as breathing. But for the MCU, Quicksilver, it just seems to be another physical. It does seem to cause some exhaustion, so I do buy that he would have this physical weakness. So yeah, that's a possible. That's an explanation for why he couldn't get out of the way of the bullets when they came flying at him. But yeah, he dies. Hawkeye manages to get him and the kid, get his body and the kid back onto the life raft as it flies off while he lies down to take a rest. But Scarlet Witch actually feels Quicksilver's death, and yeah, she cries because he was the only thing she had left of her family after their parents died. So yeah, she's obviously angry at Ultron since he was the one that technically did it. But from what I can gather, I don't think Ultron was meant to kill either of them because again, he in some way he did care about them, and even when Scarlet Witch does find one of his bodies kind of lying there, he says, "If you stay here, you'll die." If he tells her in a strange manner, "If you stay here, you'll die." But she tells him, "You know, I already have died. You know what that's like?" And she rips out the drone's metal heart as it kind of loses life. But unfortunately, now with almost no one but Thor guarding the key, one drone manages to scrape his way to it and activates it, causing the whole city to start falling down. As such, they manage to get the rest of the civilians off the city, and so they managed to pretty much cause the city to implode. And another thing I forgot to mention. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting certain things. During the middle of during the battle, Black Widow tried to get the Hulk off the city too, and her plan was that she was going to try and do the "Hey, big guy, sun's getting low" thing to try and turn him back into Bruce Banner, but that got interrupted by Ultron attacking her with the jet, and so as the jet attacked the helicarrier, the Hulk went up and after it and managed to come inside and threw the Ultron body out of it, pretty much making him in control of the jet. As such, the city ultimately is destroyed as everybody is safely evacuated off of it, and those that weren't evacuated were able to get off thanks to the help of others. But in the meantime, the Hulk is still flying in the jet, and Black Widow managed to contact him, but it turns out that jet is cloaked, so they can't exactly track him. So the Hulk needs to fly it back to the helicarrier to get back to them. But rather than actually listening to her, the Hulk actually hangs up on her. And I think I kind of understand this. The Hulk, because again, mixed with Bruce's own feelings of rejection, Bruce's own feelings about feeling like the Hulk, that people no longer will want to be around him because of the Hulk's freak out, combined with his betrayal of Black Widow. Yeah, I think at this point the Hulk thinks that he has nothing, that he's really got nothing. Because yeah, Black Widow was supposed to be the one person that was supposed to relate to him, and yeah, she tricked him to transform into this creature when all he wanted to do was just run away and be left alone and be happy. So yeah, he shuts her out and the jet flies away, and we don't see what happens to him for quite a few movies. As yeah, this is the last time we see the Hulk for a while. But in the meantime, everybody is saved while Quicksilver is still dead. And oh yeah, I forgot. War Machine was on the helicarrier and he helped take out Ultron drones. I forgot to mention him. I'm sorry. There's a lot of details that are going on here that that I'm trying to keep track of. So there are certain things I forgot. Even in my notes, it just said, "Oh, and War Machine is there," because again, at this point, he's not really one of them. He wasn't because he barely appeared in the movie. Hell, Falcon wasn't even in the climax. They both had as much significance on the plot. So I'm sorry. But anyway, yeah. But anyway, pretty much with all of this in hand, everyone kind of goes home and tries to kind of recuperate. Hawkeye goes back to his family and they kind of hug it out. We see that they built kind of a new station to the Avengers, just kind of just kind of in upstate New York, and we see Thor talking with Captain America and with Cap and Tony, as they're both trying to argue that how Vision was able to lift Mjolnir, and they're saying that he was just an android, so it doesn't count. But Thor kind of gets him back on business as he says that at this point their Force Stones have been revealed. Though I'm kind of wondering why he would care about the Power Stone, because that had nothing to do with any of them. and so he wants to go and find whoever's been playing chess with their lives. Though, I'm guessing that if you want to get technical, though, I'm guessing that I'm wondering if he informed Jane about this. Maybe this is why they broke up in later films. But yeah, he's going off to do his own thing, and as for Tony, he's also kind of taking a break himself. He just kind of needs to go off and he just kind of needs to go and kind of do his own thing for a while. In the meantime, with the Hulk gone, with Bruce, with the Hulk gone, Thor off to try and find out what's been going on with their lives, and Tony going off and Tony going off to try and reorient himself. The last people that are left are Cap, of the original team right now are Cap, Black Widow. Oh yeah, forgot. Also Hawkeye with his family. Are Cap, Black Widow, and Nick Fury. With Black Widow still trying to find anything that's connected to Bruce, and the closest they can find is a jet that crash landed in the sea, but they don't know if it was the one that the Hulk took or if it was just a random crash. Sorry, I'm hot. As such, Black Widow was hoping that he was back and that he's safe, but Cap managed to call her and say, "Are you ready to meet the new recruits?" And we see that a new team of Avengers has been assembled. In this case, consisting of Falcon, War Machine, Vision, and Scarlet Witch. And so the film ends with Cap looking at each of them and saying Avengers, and before he can say assemble, the credits roll. However, of course, this being a Marvel film, we still have our after credits scene. So in this case, it's a mid credits scene only. As we once again get adding on to the ongoing plot, as we see the Infinity Gauntlet in what looks like some kind of vault in some kind of chamber as it opens up and is presented, and we see Thanos come in, put the glove on, and saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself." And that's kind of the last you have of this movie, so yeah. So what do I think of Avengers Age of Ultron? Yeah, okay, this is a long plot summary, sorry about that. I suppose I should talk about the pluses. For starters, the film of course has plenty of cool action and set pieces, like you'd expect from any good Marvel movie. The effects all look fantastic. The designs of the world are really nice, though I do think it's kind of limiting that most of the fights happen in cities, but the action is still really nice and cool to look at. There are still a lot of cool fight scenes. I think one of the better fight scenes in the film are the climax and the Hulkbuster fight. As for the Hulkbuster, you see the Hulk and Tony actually going head to head on an even keel, and it's just really fun to watch. And of course the climax, because so much is happening and the stakes are actually grander and higher, and it's really fun and cool. So I give it kudos for that. And of course, once again, the acting is really good for the most part. All the main characters are still acted perfectly, especially Robert Downey Jr. He still brings the same energy and life to Tony Stark that you would expect him to bring. I loved seeing all these characters interacting and seeing more of their arcs continuing on. And another thing I liked about it is that the film also managed to continue other arcs and continue other character stuff. Like, since the Hulk no longer has not gotten any solo films since the Incredible Hulk, his story's been kind of continuing in the background of other films he's appeared in. Like in Avengers, we saw him actually becoming a hero and joining up with everyone else. But in Age of Ultron, we see him kind of somewhat losing that fame after Wanda got to him, and him just feeling like he's even more of an outcast. And the one person that he thinks he can trust, namely Black Widow, ultimately betrays him when she kind of pushes him away so that he can become the Hulk. So combine all that mess together, and yeah, you do feel sorry for him when he ultimately leaves, because he feels like he doesn't belong anywhere right now. So it is kind of because it is kind of sad. And you got kind of more of Tony dealing with his PTSD and funneling it, and him trying to actually, and he sees the worst, and thanks to Wanda and him flying into space, both of those combined made him see the worst case scenario, and him worried about, and part of what he said in Iron Man 3, he wants to protect what he cares about most, it actually does make sense why he would go to these extremes if he saw the worst case scenario. He wants to try and stop the worst case scenario from ever happening, so he's willing to go to extreme lengths just to keep it from happening, which is why he wanted to create Ultron in the first place. Create something that could protect the entire world, and it unfortunately just blew up in his face. And even when that happened, he was still trying to defend it because he thinks that the Avengers need something like Ultron. Because without Ultron, well, because without Ultron, they could. What if they faced another threat from the stars, something greater and bigger that they could never face? And they say, well, then we'll face it together. But he still says we'll lose, and they say, well, we'll lose together. Well, in a way, you kind of understand that that's kind of a stupid answer. Because why would, like, in some ways, I can understand their argument. Something like this is kind of an extreme measure. Something that maybe could be used as a last resort. But Tony being Tony kind of makes sense why he wanted to use it as the first resort. Tony is still a kind of an extreme personality. But seeing him but to actually have him go to these extreme lengths, it does make sense in his regard. In his way, he just thinks we shouldn't be having to go to these. We shouldn't have to use this as the last resort. We should use it right now. Stop the threat before anyone gets killed. And it makes sense, and it does make sense. But you also understand the argument. Using such extreme methods has costs. And unfortunately, one of the methods of him trying to create such a and unfortunately, in some cases, it kind of limits freedom. Because if you want to create something this big and absolute, it kind of puts everyone in a bubble. And unfortunately, it kind of becomes a method of which do you value more, freedom or protection? I would still go with freedom since we still because regardless if we make bad choices, it's our freedom and our choice to still do that. But by that same token, and on top of that, the whole stopping threats before they become a threat thing. In my book, you have to actually commit a crime before you're considered a criminal, and something can't be considered a threat yet until it does something big, until it does something that's actually threatening. And yeah, it is a flawed system, I will admit. But if we just kind of go around hurting people because of what they could possibly become, yeah, it's not gonna end well for anybody involved. I'm sorry, but that's kind of how it is. It's flawed, but sometimes you kind of work with the flaws. But in this case, again, there's good kudos for both sides. Use the maximum option to make sure that most people are safe, but you may end up limiting some freedoms. But the way Tony talked about it, maybe he wasn't trying to limit anybody. I don't know. Limit anybody, but yeah, so you can still kind of see it, but yeah, even then, using such extreme methods is still kind of, well, extreme. You can you can understand both sides of the argument, so to speak. Haley would probably agree with Tony, but yeah, anyway, yeah. And on top of that, even then, it's not just stuff like that. There are still some more character moments, like we still learn more about Scarlet Witch, or about Black Widow's backstory and her still dealing with some of the PTSD from being in the KGB and having to deal with everything she did while as a member of them, while as part of that group. And it's just you feel you do feel sorry for her, and she does start confiding in Bruce. And while I still think the romance kind of comes out of nowhere in this film, you do kind of believe. There are still some moments here and there that make you believe that Natasha and Bruce are bonding. And the scene where they both kind of compare how they're both outcasts with almost no way of having a family is something that they have in common, and they both sympathize with. And I like that. It's nice. It's just nice. Nice. And seeing all these other character moments come together, and on top of that, this film does one thing that the first Avengers film didn't do. What that first Avengers film kind of slacked off on. It gave Hawkeye character. It gave Hawkeye his own character beyond someone else. In this case, we see him kind of grappling with the fact that he's just kind of a normal guy with a bow and arrow. So his placement on the team is kind of called into question a little bit. It's not something that's focused on greatly, but it is talked about but it's talked about a couple times, and it is focused on the scene where he goes to meet his family. That's another thing this film does. Shows that he does have a life and people that he cares about. And so as he and his wife are talking, and the Avengers are just kind of recuperating, they're talking about how he and his wife talk, and he says, "I don't think," and he says, "I'm wondering if I'm even part of the team," and he says, You're wondering if no they," so, and she says that no, they need you more. No, they need you more than ever. Without you, they're lost. And it's actually kind of nice, just nice reassurance that despite Hawkeye not being the most powerful member of the team, he's still he is still an invaluable member, and it's really nice. I like that. And of course there is still some nice world building, and as this film does continue adding on to future plots, like having a reveal of a fourth Infinity Stone, in this case the Mind Stone, and revealing that it was actually this whole time in Loki's staff, which makes me just realize that Thanos gave Loki that Thanos actually did manage to get that Infinity Stone from somewhere, then gave it to Loki, most likely as a gambit so that he could get the Tesseract / the Space Stone, and wound up just losing both. I think that's just a nice that's just kind of a nice ooh, that didn't work out so well kind of moment. But yeah, that's a nice thing, and it is kind of cool seeing once again these powers at work and kind of going off in ways that ultimately lead to bad things. Like unintentionally, the Mind Stone winds up creating Ultron, and it is nice seeing that. And again, we see more. And on top of that, and I guess another thing, we see more heroes come about. We once again see Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver as active forces, and they're all right for the most part. They have sympathetic backstories, and I do understand why they turn from the good guys to the bad guys to the good guys. But I also kind of slightly agree with Haley, because she kind of made this argument to me once, that they kind of could use more time to redeem themselves. Like, I can understand they're on the path to redemption, but they also did some bad things. Hell, Scarlet Witch sicked the Hulk on an entire city. So yeah, that's a bad thing right there. A very bad thing. But at the same time, you can also understand their motives. They blame Tony Stark, and since he's a member of the Avengers, they don't like them either. They just wanted to do what they thought was right, and so yeah, in their minds, the Avengers were the bad guys. So I can kind of understand that to a degree. I kind of understand that. But Vision, I think, is a nice is the true breakout. He is truly what Ultron I feel like was supposed to be. Like, he's unbiased. He wants to protect life because he feels it's sacred. And almost forgot to mention this. He's the one that actually ended up taking out Ultron at the end. Ultron managed to save himself in one last body, and he and Vision have actually have a conversation about their differing viewpoints, as they talk about how they were both disappointments or what they were supposed to be. Vision was supposed to be a way for Ultron to continue on, and Ultron was supposed to be a global peacekeeping initiative, and both of them didn't turn out the way they were supposed to. And Ultron makes the argument that humanity will just destroy themselves, but Vision says that there's beauty to their faults and strength in that. But Ultron says that he's just naive, and eventually the conversation ends with Ultron trying to attack Vision, and Vision just destroying him. Vision is pure and good in this regard. Like, all the other Avengers, I'm not saying they're all jerks or bad guys or incompetent, but Vision is pure. Like, as he said, he's on the side of life. He will work with the Avengers, but his main priority is preserving life, and regardless of whether it's good or evil. He will take a life if it's necessary, but at the end of the day, he wants to protect it and preserve it, and I like that. It's a nice little thing. And so it's kind of seeing him be more of seeing him join the Avengers is really nice, because you see him actually wielding the powers, and you see him be a very competent member, and he kind of acts like a straight man somewhat to some of the more wackier antics of the Avengers, like, of course, him offhandedly handing Mjolnir to Thor, showing that he actually is trustworthy. To at one point in the climax, Ultron Prime winds up singling out Thor and bringing him to the cathedral, and they have a big fight. Thor ends up losing Mjolnir and tries keeping Ultron distracted long enough for Vision to get it, and he manages to knock Ultron aside with the hammer, and as he hands the hammer back, it's like, it's strange, it's way too perfectly balanced. Like, yeah, you gotta keep it out, or else the swing, it has to be, or else it'll affect the swing. And I think that's humorous. He is kind of like the straight man he is sort of their straight man because of that, and I like that. But as a superhero, he is just pure. And he, again, isn't Jarvis. He's the voice of Jarvis, so he has Jarvis in there as a part of him. But at the end of the day, he's someone new. And I like that. It is rather nice. So, but of course, if we're going to talk about all this, we should talk about Ultron. Now, I'm going to say this right now. James Spader, hold on, I want to make sure I got his name right. Yeah, James Spader, I think, did a good job with what he had. His performance as Ultron can be creepy, funny, and have its own little menace to it. But Ultron himself, just Don't love him, don't hate him, just I'll talk about his positives. Positives, he can be legitimately threatening and sound creepy with how James Spader plays him. And in a way, he is sort of like a dark reflection of Tony. He has many of Tony's inflections, so to speak. He talks like Tony, uses phrases like Tony, just gestures about him, or makes gestures like him. I think, one example is, when he's talking to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch and convincing them to join them, and they say, you're going to take down the event, you want to kill the Avengers, what I want is to create world peace. And, yeah, that. It's the way he talks about, or even earlier than that, when he talks about people creating things to ensure the destruction, to ultimately destroy them. When he talks, it's people make smaller people. Babies, sorry, I forgot the word. Just small little things here and there that show he's like Tony. He's kind of meant to be kind of like Tony. He's got many of his inflections, and even when he's facing the Avengers and one of his bodies being destroyed, he's it just for a second, it's with the benefit of hindsight, and then bam. He definitely kind of, in some ways, he feels like an evil Tony Stark. He's got the mannerisms, he's got the wit, he's got the brain. He actually does feel like, in some way, an evil Tony Stark. And he does play it well. But what makes it even better, too, is that he doesn't want to be connected to Tony Stark. He's trying everything in his power to disconnect himself from Tony Stark. There's a reason he sings the "I got no strings to hold me down" thing, because he sees that, because when he was designed to be a savior, he interpreted that as, I need to go beyond what I was supposed to be. And he thinks that if he worked with Tony and went by what he wanted, what Tony wanted, he'd be limiting himself. Sorry, he'd be severely limiting himself, and he'd be just subservient to this lower class being. So his best way he thinks that he needs to ensure peace, cut the strings, and become independent. And as such, if anyone even makes even the slightest comparison between him and Tony, he gets pissed off. When he and Tony, when he went to the weapons dealer and then sent him $1 billion. He's like, $1 billion. It's as I like to say, keep your friends rich, your enemies rich, and then you can decide, and you can find out which is which later. And the weapons dealer actually recognized that as something Tony said to him once, and he realized that Ultron is something that belongs to Tony. And the instant Ultron hears about that, he gets pissed off and actually ends up cutting off his arm. And says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but it just really irks me if someone compares me to Tony Stark. I'm not Tony Stark." Because he doesn't want, in a way, he's like a rebellious child. He wants to try and, he's just, in a way, what he's trying to do is he's trying to branch off. It's you want me to be peace, this is what I'm going to be. This is what I think peace is. You don't like it, Dad? Well, too bad. This is what I want. He's just trying to do everything he can to distance himself from being Tony, but in a way, he still is. But the problem with him is, I'm sorry to say, it's a problem that a lot of other villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe have. He's evil for evil's sake. Yeah, he's got a bunch of nice, funny quirks, and he does have something interesting going with him wanting to deny Tony Stark, with him trying to actually deny not being a part of Tony. But that character stuff is too little. Even the stuff between him, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver, there's supposed to be a connection there between them. He doesn't want them getting hurt, and when they eventually do turn code and join the Avengers, he's hurt. But I see no reason for them to want to bond. It doesn't hurt him that much. It maybe hurts him a few seconds, and there are a few times where he does show concern for them. Even when Wanda's standing over one of his bodies and he tells her, "If you stay here, you'll die." But it's nothing there. Hold on a sec. Sorry, my dog was giving puppy eyes, so I thought he just jumped off the bed. I thought he needed attention. Turns out he just was trying to distract me. Wanted to bring him in on the vlog, but he didn't want to. Anyways, I was saying. So, like I was saying, it's like they tried to have a character arc with him. Him trying to detach himself from Tony, him having a connection, or thinking what he was, or him trying to have a connection with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, but unfortunately, there's just too little there to work with, and there's just too little there to work with, which results in him for the majority of the film being evil. His motivation is just, humanity screwed up, I'm gonna kill him now, bye. That's his entire motivation in his character. There are some slight stuff with him caring for Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and him wanting to deny Tony, but not enough is done with that, so unfortunately it makes him less memorable. But again, I'm not saying that he's an awful villain. There's enough there for him to be entertaining, just not enough there for him to be compelling, if that makes any sense. And of course, then this also brings me back to one of the reasons why I felt the film was underwhelming when I first saw it. And yeah, I guess I kind of can't beat around the bush with this anymore. The film, unfortunately, I think one of the reasons why this film was as underwhelming as it was because tonally, it felt like a retread, and it didn't feel like anything big was accomplished with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, the film does have consequences that do kind of break through to other films. The Hulk, the Avengers having their new headquarters, the strain with showing that there is somewhat of a strain with Tony, or just kind of the Black Widow stuff, Black Widow having a relationship with him. There are things that do spread out from this movie and do have long-lasting consequences later down the line in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But other problems I would think... Oh, yeah, another problem I have with... another problem... Oh, actually, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that after I talk about this. One of the problems... But again, a big problem with it is... This doesn't feel like a payoff to anything. It feels like a continuation. And I suppose it's not fair considering that the first film was such a big hit when it first came out. But the first Avengers film was the payoff to years of build-up. And it was such good build-up. Just one film after another. Just each one, little by little, laying the seeds for the final film that was going to come of it. And so after that you get little by little more build up for other things. But this film doesn't feel like it concludes anything. Yeah, stuff does indeed happen. Some important stuff that happens later down the line, but while the last film felt like the final piece of a puzzle, this film just feels like another piece of a larger puzzle. Like, let's say that Phase 1 of the formation of the Avengers was just its own thing. Avengers definitely put the finale saying, well, here's your finale, now where can we go from here? And so then we get Phase 2, which starts building up the stuff with the Infinity Stones. That's where our next story arc is. That is where we can go next with this. And so, little by little, you start seeing that kind of get built up. You see the Aether return in Thor: The Dark World. You see the Aether come in Thor: The Dark World before that was revealed to be one of the 6 Infinity Stones, and even that film revealing that the Tesseract was actually the first, so that this next plot actually did have ties to the first one. And then you still had bigger build up, and then you still had one of the ground shaking ones in Winter Soldier when you learned that Hydra was in bed in S.H.I.E.L.D. the whole time. And then with Guardians of the Galaxy revealing yet another Infinity Stone, just more and more build-up. Avengers, it felt like the stakes were getting higher, because now you're getting to cosmic level stuff. It's not just on Earth now. You've got this big cosmic bad guy. And so you get the next Avengers film and you think, oh, this is going to have something tied to that, or at least some finality, something that was been built up through these films. But instead, it's just another threat. It's just another bad guy in the Marvel Cinematic. It's just another Marvel Cinematic Universe villain. It's just another Marvel movie. And admittedly, it does, and it just feels like another piece, another build-up for the Infinity Arc. And admittedly, the build-up is good the film brings in Vision, establishes another Infinity Stone, kind of gets a new roster Avengers set up while the old guard kind of some of the old guards step aside to do their own things. But they don't feel, but even then, that part doesn't feel like finality. That's just them doing their own things to be followed up on in later films. It doesn't feel like a build-up. This film doesn't feel like a payoff to anything. It just feels like another feels like another one of those solo Marvel movies. Like, it's like this film was like, I don't know how I can describe it. It's like if the Avengers were a separate team altogether and this is just the next film showcasing their adventures. It's not bad. It's probably really good. We'll probably see it again, but it's not a payoff. And the Avengers are supposed to be a big payoff, as it involves most of the characters from this universe all coming together to face a giant threat. But the threat in this case is one that they made. And the stakes are huge, as Ultron makes it clear. He wants to exterminate all of mankind because he thinks that mankind screwed the pooch royally. And even then, the build-up, seeing everything go to hell in a handbasket is great. It's still not. It just feels like any other Marvel movie, and I don't mean that in a bad, and I don't mean that as a totally bad thing, but I don't know. It just feels like the Avengers film should be bigger. The first Avengers film for that phase was bigger. Being a crossover, bringing together all these individual characters that you knew existed in the same continuity thanks to hints here and there, but otherwise were separated from each other, existing in their own genres, their own stories, their own little niches, and then saw all of them coming together to face a large threat, a potential invasion. That was grand. This is them facing a robot that wants to kill humans. This is them wanting to face a robot. They're just like any other superhero team. And I know in the comics they do have their ongoing series, and they are just kind of like a superhero, and they are just kind of like any other superhero team. But in the context of these films, the Avengers are meant to be a culmination of the elements throughout these films coming together. So this doesn't feel like a proper payoff to that. And again, I'm not saying this to disgrace the movie, but I am saying it because when you have an Avengers film, a sequel to one of the biggest films ever, and then you building up and the next story arc you're building up looks like it's going to be something bigger than the stakes they had to face before, this film kind of feels like a slight downgrade. Especially not even because it is a downgrade, because it's not a downgrade. It's at like the same level. But the problem is that ever since this film, things just kept going up, and then things kind of went like this, slowly, steadily going up, and this film kind of brings it down here a little bit, kind of brings it back down here, and it still continues the plot. But Avengers is supposed to be like the big crossover event, or the Avengers film is supposed to be like the big crossover event, and this film just doesn't feel like that. It's just a regular superhero film. And I'm sorry if I'm being a dead horse here, and I'm not saying this to make the movie sound bad, because it's not. I do genuinely like this movie. I really do. Rewatching it, I don't feel that same level of disappointment I did when I first watched it. It is fun. The action is great. The main action, all the actors give great performances. There is some good drama and character interaction. Some character arcs are expanded and continued. New aspects to the lore are introduced. New characters are introduced and written nicely. There's still good humor. There's a lot of cool environments. So still some plenty of good ideas, and it does set up more stuff for later films that's expanded on and continued. It's just, again, I think that's the reason why I was disappointed with it in the beginning, because it didn't feel like a payoff. It just felt like another piece in the puzzle. And when it's supposed to be an Avengers film, that's admittedly a little disappointing. On top of that, this kind of might be a minor flaw that you could counter. Part of this film's a minor problem with this film, in order to fully understand it, you kind of need to watch Agents of Shield. And for those of you who don't know, well, I guess you probably do, but I guess you probably do if you're watching these. But for a minor chance you don't, Agents of Shield was an ABC television show that was supposed to be linked to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But as the films went on, it had less and less to do with the show. And Joss Whedon was heavily involved with the making of that show, but it also wound up and it was supposed to directly in season 2, one episode was supposed to lead directly into Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron. In fact, the helicarrier was apparently created by, and because it was revealed in that series that Phil Coulson was alive, brought back to life via alien blood. It was apparently Phil Coulson that helped rebuild the helicarrier. He was the one that figured out where Loki's scepter was and was the one that sent the Avengers after it. So yeah, but they don't really mention them in that regard. And with the release of Infinity War, you could kind of say that. So you kind of need to watch it. And I know you can make the same argument with Infinity War, like, oh, you should have watched all that anyway, so it's your own fault that you didn't. Well, I will have a counter to that. Because my counter to that is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a TV show. And while it may be connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, let's be honest here. When a multi-million dollar movie series is going to garner more attention than a TV show. And even if you wanted to have it be connected with each other, you should at least talk about the characters. But Joss Whedon didn't, because as he said, and I'm not going to be quoting him directly, he didn't even go on to explain them, because as he said, why would he shouldn't have to explain something from from just a TV show that some people may not have watched. So then why even have the references to that show in the first place, or have some elements of the show lead into the movie and be payoffs to it if you don't think that most of your audience are going to be watching it. It's just supposed to be like a nice little bonus if you watch it, I suppose, but otherwise that's kind of a little disappointing. And I know it's kind of a similar argument with Infinity War. You have to have seen all the other Avengers movies in order to get it, and we'll get more into that when I actually get to Infinity War. But at least with Infinity War, all the films are so big and are such big blockbusters that you kind of will spend most of your time to see them. So you probably would like to see most of them. Whereas with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., while odds are a lot of people would be seeing it, not as many people would be seeing it compared to the films. So, yeah. That's a complaint, minor one, since it doesn't really come up beyond the opening scene and the helicarrier, so willing to let it slide. But either way, yeah. So, yeah, on the whole, Age of Ultron is not a bad movie, by any means. Like I said, good acting, good action, good characters, clever writing. Sorry, had to shoo someone away. I'm wrapping this up anyway. Clever writing, great characterization, and all kind of come together to make a good movie. My only problems are that it does not feel like it. Like, it feels a little less than it should be, even though it's not bad, even though it's still pretty great. The villain is at best, and it does require some other knowledge of other parts of the media to get. But otherwise, yeah, on the whole, good movie. It's still a good movie. Just it felt like it could have just been a little better. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. So yeah. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. If you want to hear more about my work, I recommend checking out the DC Geeks Nation podcast that I'm a part of. We upload our host is Jay with our host is Jay of Earth 2 with co-host Brian of Earth 16. Brian of Earth 16. We have quite a few there. There are five of us in total, each intermingling and kind of doing our own things and helping each other out. So if you want to look it up, I recommend it. But for these vlogs, next time we meet, we're going to be kind of going back to individual heroes as we take a look at Marvel's smallest hero of all with Ant-Man.